Okay, one last time, Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee. We're here for Council Bill 21-0080, ordinance of estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. I'm Eric Costello, Councilman for the 11th District, Chair of the committee. I'm joined by Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton of the 6th District, who's going to be vice chairing for the morning session. Also is Councilman Isaac Gitzy Schleifer, 5th District, member of the committee, Councilwoman Danny McCray, 2nd District, member of the committee, Councilman Mark Conway, 4th District, Council President Nick Mosby, Councilwoman Odette Ramos, 14th District, Councilman Robert Stokes, 12th District, member of the committee, and Councilman Chris Burnett, 8th District, member of the committee, and Councilman Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District, member of the committee. Also here is staff to the committee, Marguerite Curran, representing Mayor Brandon Scott is Nina Themlis, representing Council President Nick Mosby is Matt Stegman and Nikki Thompson. First session for the day is going to be the Department of Finance and the Bureau of Budget and Management Research. In chambers today, we have Director Henry Raymond, as well as Director Bob Seneme. Director Raymond, take it away.
Good morning, Council.
Turn the camera on.
Again, good morning, Chairman Costello, honorable members of the committee. I'm Henry Raymond, Director of Finance. I'll now share my content. Again, good morning. The mission of the Finance Department includes the following: providing excellent customer service to our citizens, providing a full range of financial services to city agencies, collecting and investing all monies due to the city, managing the city's debt, and developing and executing sound fiscal policies and practices. This is the department's organizational chart. There are 289 positions in the fiscal 22 recommended budget. At this high level, there are 6 bureaus and 3 offices. There are 2 deputy directors. 1 deputy director to the far right has oversight of the Budget and Management Research Bureau, Risk Management, and Treasury. This is the long-range fiscal planning function. To the left, the deputy director has responsibility for fiscal and integrity, BAPS, procurement, revenue collection, project management, and grants management. This is the operations side of the house. Moving to the next slide, revenue collection.
Director, hang on one second. I wanted to recognize Daniel Ramos, who's the Deputy City Administrator who has oversight of the Department of Finance within the administration. Thank you, Director. Please continue.
Yep. For the fiscal 22 recommended budget, the resources will allow the department to maintain current level of service across all bureaus and offices. The priority outcome for the Department of Finance is the responsible stewardship of city resources. The first bureau, revenue collection, is service number 148. The fiscal 22 recommended budget is $11,525,169. The primary purpose of the revenue collection unit is to issue the majority of the bills on behalf of the city, collect the revenue, and provide customer service to all citizens that have billing issues. For fiscal 22, we are funding 2 positions to support the implementation of the city's new tax sale exemption program. And also, this budget transfers 21 general fund positions and 1.5 million in parking fine collection costs to the parking management fund. The next bureau, Treasury and Debt Management, service number 150, is recommended at $1.2 million. This service provides the management of the city's cash, investments, debt, banking services. They manage the cash flow and the banking relationship with the city and the issuance of debt and the investment of city funds. Administration, this is service number 698. The fiscal 22 recommended amount is $2,036,766. The major change with finance administration is funding 1 new position to serve as Director of Corporate Compliance to increase the city's collections on self-reported taxes. Now, administration essentially serves as executive control for the finance department, oversees all bureau operations, and internally coordinates human resources for the department, manages the city's combined charity management contract, and works with other agencies on various initiatives to achieve and improve efficiency and effectiveness. Procurement, service number 699. The 22 recommended amount is 4.4 million. Procurement provides professional procurement services for the purchase of goods, commodities, and services on a citywide basis. On an annual basis, the service contracts for goods and services are approximately 500 million. The major highlight for this bureau is the transfer of 2 general fund positions to the law department's Minority and Women Business Opportunity Office. Surplus property disposal, service number 700. The fiscal 22 recommended amount is $161,349. This service provides for the proper disposition of surplus property. From 2012 through 2019, we generated $5.1 million. So we have a positive fund balance because we're bringing in significantly more than the cost of the disposition and administration of surplus property. And the proceeds are split 50-50 with the agencies. Moving to printing services, service number 701. The recommended funding level for fiscal 22 is 3.7 million. This is an internal service fund that provides all type of print media for agencies in the Baltimore City Public School System. This includes graphic design, printing, copying, document scanning, data center printing, etc. Moving to accounts payable, service number 702. The fiscal 22 recommended budget is $910,666. This service is responsible for paying all vendor invoices, approximately 10,400 per month, and working with agencies to provide them service in all matters related to payments. The next service is payroll, service number 703. The 22 recommended amount is 3.7 million. This service is responsible for paying weekly employees, bi-weekly employees, seasonal employees, as well as several thousand temporary summer youth works employees. Moving to accounting, service number 704. The 22 recommended budget level is $3 million. This service provides comprehensive accounting and reporting services for the city, including the preparation of the comprehensive annual financial report, commonly known as the CAFR. This unit is responsible for putting in place appropriate internal controls regarding processing all financial transactions and ensuring that those transactions are in compliance with generally accepted accounting principles. Moving to risk management, this is service number 707. The 22 recommended level is 4.3 million. The major highlight for risk is the transfer of 1.2 million for workers' comp related contracts. And that transfer is moving to the city's law department. The next item is the next bureau is the operating budget management service number 708. This is BBMR. This service is responsible for the development, preparation, and the execution of the city's annual operating budget. The Bureau monitors revenue and expenditures throughout the year, analyzes state and local legislation, also performs a number of management research projects. Main change for this service is 2 positions that will assist in the analysis and reporting requirements for federal funding, the American Rescue Plan, over the next several years. Fiscal integrity and recovery is service number 710. The 22 recommended funding level is 1.1 million. Essentially, this office is responsible for assessment appeals, pilot management, and all forms of tax credit management. Finance project management, service number 711. The 22 recommended funding level is 1.4 million. This unit is responsible for coordinating, designing, and implementing all systems changes within the Department of Finance as it relates to financial applications, billing systems, and tax systems. That concludes my prepared remarks as it relates to the overview of the Department of Finance.
Thank you, Director. Let's jump over to Bob for his presentation, and we'll get into questions from the council.
Councilman Costello, I don't have any additional remarks. It was included in Henry's remarks for that one service, which is our 708 operating budget management.
Perfect. Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not have any remarks at this time.
Thank you, Mr. President. Director, I wanted to touch on Service 702, accounts payable. Under performance measures, percentage of invoices paid within 30 days of city receipt. Our actuals have been less than stellar over the years. 48% in fiscal 18, 52% in 19, 55% in 20. In 20, when we hit 55%, we had a target of 70%. In 21, we had a target of 70%. Let's start with, do we have any idea of where we're at for fiscal year 21 for that measure, recognizing that, you know, you haven't closed out the books yet for the year?
At this point in time, we do not have the estimated target for 21. What I can share with the council is that the Department of Finance and all agencies in city government presently are working on a prompt payment initiative to improve the timely payment of all invoices, with particular attention on overdue invoices, i.e. invoices that are more than 30 days old. And we have significantly reduced the number of overdue invoices from approximately $20 million outstanding down to about $12 million outstanding over the last 2 months. So we have made significant progress, and we will continue to work to reduce the number of outstanding invoices so that we can comply with the city's policy of paying all invoices within 30 days.
And do we know how many invoices that $12 million outstanding represents?
Approximately 1,800, which was down from approximately 2,700 invoices when it was 20 million.
Okay. And you're confident we're going to hit 80% this year?
I didn't say we would hit 80%. I said there would be significant improvement.
I know, but the budget book says the target for this year is 80%.
And we would hope to hit 80% or better.
Okay,
Chairman Costello, if I might interject,
please.
just keep in mind in regards to this particular measure, we are paying almost 1,000 more invoices a month compared to pre-COVID times with all the additional emergency procurement. Director Raymond has done a stellar job of bringing additional resources, so bringing on temporary staff in order to help meet that demand over the last year. Also, we are working with, we have some vendors that have a very high dollar amount, and it kind of throws off the payables. So we are working directly with some of those vendors in order to help them work through the payables issue. And that you'll see when those get unlocked, you'll see that number, that total amount significantly decrease.
Definitely appreciate the context and thank you for that, and certainly recognize the increased workload on procurement related to COVID. I still feel that this is an area that we need to do a little better, and I'm more concerned with the volume of accounts payable as opposed to the dollar amount, just because we have a lot of vendors out there that are small businesses that heavily rely on getting their payment on time, which I know your team certainly appreciates. So I hope that we can continue to make progress on that front. Colleagues, questions? Councilman Schleifer, then Dorsey, then Burnett.
Okay, thank you. Is there still a two question rule in effect?
Two-roll question is always in place, Councilman Schleifer.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Director Raymond and Bob, for all your work in getting us to this point over here with the budget. My questions are around procurement. So the first question I have is, how many vacancies are there in the procurement team or division?
Yeah, I am not sure. We can follow up with you on the number of vacancies.
Okay. My next question is, who on the team is in charge of procurement?
The acting bureau chief is Keisha Brown.
Is she here with us today? Is she with us today on this hearing? Can you hear me?
I'm being told the answer is yes.
It's okay. All right, those are my two questions. I'll ask my next questions when we come back around.
Can we get, Councilman, did you have a question for Ms. Brown?
Yeah, I have four more questions for procurement.
All right, can we get her? She's here.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, Councilman, why don't you start off?
Sure. So the first question I have, and this is something I've heard from multiple agencies. Well, first of all, hello, Ms. Brown. We haven't met before, which is something actually that I think I pointed out in previous year's budget hearings, that I think the procurement team should be more visible to the city and to the council. I don't know who you're filling in for, who was the previous person, nor do I really know anybody who's working in those offices. And so when questions come up from agencies, it kind of feels like it's sort of an anonymous team, and that's not a good feeling. But my question for you, and I don't know how long you've been here, so I don't know if you have the answers to these, but multiple agencies are talking about things taking extremely long in procurement. Can you talk to some of those concerns that people are having? I'll give an example that I ask about 3 times a week, like the crash barrels on 83, and the length of time it's taking to get these buckets with sand in them.
Good morning again. I'm Keisha Brown. I am the acting city purchasing agent. I actually serve in the capacity of the deputy chief procurement officer for the city, and I've been here since the fall of 2019. Thank you for our opportunity to respond to your questions, honorable members of City Council. There has been some concerns in terms of the visibility of procurement staff. A great deal of it had to do with caseload and increase in spending. And the model that the city of Baltimore utilized, I don't believe from my assessment address the capacity of the office. But what we have done with the resources that we have assigned procurement managers and procurement buyers to agencies, and on minimum, they meet with them once a month. A lot of times they're there to assist them with methods of procurement, which is some of the feedback you may be getting from the agency as the lag time. A lot of time in the system, there's not the appropriate documents attached. So we reached out and became kind of a conduit for them in their meetings as they plan on how to submit those documents so they're not returned. In addition, we're there to support them with their methods of procurement. Oftentimes, they would guess a method of procurement that's not in line with the ABA model of procurement, and oftentimes those documents are sent back. But we have seen a great turnaround in this area in supporting the staff and meeting with them at minimum once a month. So we have coordinating management teams with DGS, our larger agencies, DPW, in addition to BSIT and DOT. I hope that answers your question. If you have additional, I'm happy to elaborate.
No, that doesn't answer my question. I mean, I appreciate the outline. That's very informative, because I'm not really so familiar with how the procurement part works. But my question was, why are things taking so long? So is there like a specific reason why that's happening?
I thought I addressed it in terms of the capacity and resources and the additional spending in the city. And I don't believe that, I'm sorry.
Well, if we actually look at the numbers, so if we look to last year's, in the budget book, it has the actuals. Let's just look at 2020. The actuals show that the numbers are pretty much in line with previous years, actually significantly lower than 2018 and 2017. So the numbers of purchase orders are actually have actually fallen off a lot. So why? And also looking into next year, it's showing that there's also a budgeted decrease of a couple less positions. So there's less purchase orders, there's less positions, and there is a clear issue with how long things are taking. So I'm just trying to understand why things are taking so long. I understand improvements you're trying to make, and I hope that those will be effective, but basically in every category, and I'm not putting this on you, I know you're in an acting capacity, but like even the formal solicitations, there's 2 bids, whereas in previous the target's 5, and so it seems like a lot less work is being done, and the effectiveness of the work is also fallen off. So that's sort of like encapsulates the rest of my questions. But I mean, my main question, which I'd like some clarity on, is why are things taking so long? And if you want to use the example I gave, like the crash barrels, which seem to be a pretty simple purchase, I'm happy to go there. Or if you have a different example you'd like to discuss, to just so that the council can understand, so that we can report back to our constituents when they ask about it at every community meeting, why certain things are taking so long or why certain things aren't happening. And we go to the agencies and then they tell us things are stuck in procurement.
Right. And
Yeah, I'll jump in here for a second.
Mhm.
Part of the reason for this is the fact that we were in a COVID environment, everybody working remotely. That slowed things down across the board, whether it was at the agency level or the finance department's procurement function. Second, the priority since last March exclusively has been emergency procurements related to the pandemic. That took priority number 1 above all else. And the workload related to the emergency procurements has been staggering. I think a number of agencies have been overwhelmed because of the responses that have been required for COVID. And it wasn't just a one-time thing like, oh, we did a certain number of things between March and June, and that was the end of it. It has been ongoing in terms of food service delivery, hotels, securities, the convention center. So all of those things have driven our numbers down. So like specifically, the number of purchase orders issued, again, the priority has been COVID related, not the normal activities that would normally occur, combined with the majority of agency staff working remotely. Now, you specifically mentioned the number of bids per formal solicitation. For 20, the goal was 5. We hit 2. 2 was less than the actual from 19 of 3. And again, it's because in 20, the focus became for the last third of the year, March through June, the focus was exclusively on emergency procurements, not the normal types of formal solicitations and RFPs that we would normally do. That all took a back seat to COVID-19 related initiatives.
So, and I'll wrap up with this, Chairman, but so if I'm hearing correctly, so things are taking so long because of COVID, and the amount of formal bids and solicitations we've had being reduced is because of COVID. And the one thing that I guess doesn't add up to that would be the last line in the performance measures, that you guys are saying that 91% of your purchase orders issued were meeting the benchmark timeframes. So those are just not consistent. So if things are, I understand, you know, during emergency contracts, you're not able to get as many bids. I completely understand that. Why things are taking so long in procurement, that's a whole different story. I don't agree with you on that. But then how come the benchmark is at 91%, actually beating the target? So what are these time frames? Are you able to send the council, the committee, what these time frames are, so we can understand why you guys feel like you have a 91% you know, effectiveness when it comes to meeting timeframes?
Yes, we can provide a document that explains that.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, before we move on, Ms. Brown, the councilman had a question earlier about the number of vacant positions in procurement. Are you able to answer that?
We can follow up with that. I do have that. We have a couple of salary saving. I want to make sure I get on the same page with the director.
All right, Nina, can you please add that as the first request? So that's Schleifer, and that's the number of. Councilman, repeat the request again.
So the first one is what the
Number of vacancies.
number of vacancies. And then the next one is them providing the document that explains the timeframes on purchases, so we can understand how they met a 91% effectiveness on timeframes. Yet every agency I've spoken to has felt that procurement has been moving very slowly.
Okay, so Nina, you got the second one. You good? All right, Councilman Schleifer, thank you. We are going to Councilman Burnett, or Councilman Dorsey, I'm sorry, was next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. I have a question for BBMR. Bob, on February 9th, in a hearing of this committee, I asked a question that I think if we went back through the budget hearings over the last 4 years, I've asked in at least 3 of them, and I followed up the next day on February 10th with a letter to you reiterating the questions about an accounting of the damages to city property from vehicle crashes or due to causes that can reasonably be concluded to have been vehicle crashes. I don't have an answer to that request. It's 4 months later, and I want to know how we're going to get an answer to this. And you know, I think that it's reasonable that BBMR should be able to analyze these budget things in order to be able to give us the capacity to make informed decisions and have an informed understanding. What's the status on that?
So I think, Councilman, we did respond. That's not something that BBMR has available, and I think we directed you to DOT. DOT has the direct that information on how many accidents there are and any damage that is done. So if I'm remembering correctly, we had asked you to direct it to DOT and that we could help coordinate that and verify the information, but that's not something that BBMR has.
But I think I responded that it's not all DOT owned property. I mean, some of it's DOT owned property, some of it's buildings and property that's owned by DGS, the school system, some of it is DPW property like fire hydrants. There are other things, you know, there are street trees that they deal with forestry. This is across the board things that are owned by all city agencies. And in terms of budgetary kind of sense of things, that this seems like something that finance should be able to do.
So
So
again,
your specific request is what, claims or the amounts paid?
No, and let me make clear, I have gone to great lengths to make clear I'm not asking about claims or revenue recuperation. But that seems to be the answer I get every time I ask this question. The request is an account of the full cost of damage to city property caused by crashes with motor vehicles. Not merely what's recovered through insurance or litigation, or only what can be known from police reports in cases where the responsible party is known. Is what, you know, what is the full value of damages to the taxpayers of Baltimore City from all of the property that's damaged by motor vehicles that, you know, primarily by motor vehicles that can't seem to stay on the road. I mean, and in the absence, I can tell you, in the absence of an actual answer to this question, I have gotten some numbers from DOT on a limited number of one specific thing, which is streetlights, and based on getting some numbers and cobbling together some average costs and also combining that with a labor cost that I got from BGE that I think is comparable to what the city might incur in replacing streetlights. It's, I saw, my estimate is that in 2008, streetlights alone were $1.7 million in damages. In 2019, it was 2.7, and in 2020, it was 2.4 million in damages, and that's for streetlights alone. But for me, I just can't get a comprehensive look at that. What, and I think having asked this question like every year of various agencies, I think that it's reasonable for me to ask the finance department to pull together budgetary numbers for budgetary analysis at a certain point when I can't get every city. It shouldn't fall on me to try to get every city agency to come up with these numbers for their individual part, and for me to force them to do the level of analysis and compiling of information that would be necessary for any person who wanted to do a reasonable budgetary assessment here. It shouldn't fall on me, and that's why I'm asking BBMR to get this information.
Okay, so the finance department will take the lead on coordinating and providing this information. So to be clear, you're interested in the cost of damage to city property by vehicles.
Yes, I will forward you, Mr. Raymond, the
Councilman, please send that in writing and send it to Mara James, Nina Themlis, copy myself, and copy Director Raymond, so we can get that, and that'll be request number 3. Okay?
Yep. Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir. All right. Councilman Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Director Raymond, and to your team. So the one item, or just like request, Mr. Chair, I had was in line with Councilmember Slifer's sort of comments around transparency. Could the committee get an org chart for finance department, and something I'll be asking for all the agencies?
You're going to get a package of emails from me probably by the end of the day. I've already taken the liberty of getting an org chart from every single agency, as well as cell phone numbers for division chiefs and up. So I'm waiting on maybe 6 or 7 out of the 40 agencies, but once those all come in, you'll get it in one package. I just didn't want to send multiple emails. So no need to add a request on that one.
Got it. Okay. So the first question I had was around, sorry, lost my way here. So the first one was around the questions of paying out invoices. Is there an impact on the budget? So when you pay out the older last fiscal year invoices being paid, does it impact this coming budget? Like, how does that rollover work, Director?
Good morning, Councilman Burnett. No, there's no fiscal impact of paying out the invoices. We do not have any type of a cash flow issue related to that. The majority of these invoices are encumbered, so the funds are available, whether it's from prior year or the current year.
Got it. Okay. My second question for this round, Mr. Chair, was the service requests closeout time, service 148 for revenue collection. So obviously I understand that the reason behind the dip due to COVID and working remotely. But the questions, I guess, were around what is the impact on constituents if they aren't able to get whatever their issue is resolved? Are late fees waived? Are they provided any other support if they are calling in and for obviously legitimate reasons unable to get assistance in a reasonable time, or the amount of time that the agency is deemed reasonable to give somebody assistance with revenue collection and paying their taxes, their fees, their fines, penalties, that kind of thing.
I would answer that by indicating that that's part of the reason why the number of calls went up to 337,000, because the service requests were lagging. More citizens called to get updates on their particular issue. And in reference to your specific inquiry about waiving interest and penalties, that's done on a case-by-case basis. And where warranted, we do waive interest and penalties. It's based on the citizen providing the appropriate documentation, our review of the service request, acknowledging that there was a delay, and then we take the appropriate steps to waive interest and penalty where
Got
it
it.
makes
Okay.
sense.
Okay. Just yeah, that was just a concern I had. I'll save my other questions for the next round, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Vice President Middleton. And then we have Councilwoman Ramos. Colleagues, if there's anyone else, please use the raise hand. Then we got Conway next. All right, so Middleton, Ramos, Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Raymond and your team, I just first want to thank you for joining us today. And your department is very crucial to the workings of the whole entire city. And as you said, customer service and managing our city debt are the top priorities as we move forward, especially through COVID. And so my two questions, I know you, of the finance department, played a big role in helping to iron out Workday, and just kind of, and you know, that's payroll, and still there are still employees that are still having problems not getting total paychecks and so on. Can you, has there been an added improvement, or can you just talk about that a little bit? I know Human Services plays the other role in this, but you actually kind of do the payroll. Are there some added things that you have done to help the employees of the city, especially our ones that make, you know, $30,000-$40,000 a year and live paycheck to paycheck? Can you speak on that?
Yes, Councilwoman Middleton. Following the implementation of Workday, a number of issues were reported, you know, that we're all well aware of. We've had council hearings regarding them. Some of the steps we took were to deploy additional consultants to help us properly configure Workday. We've had extensive communication and outreach with agency human resource personnel on a daily and weekly basis. The number of individuals not receiving correct pay has dropped off dramatically. We believe at this stage, Workday payroll is stabilized. We report metrics to the administration every 2 weeks. And according to all of the metrics, the number of issues related to employees not receiving their proper pay has dramatically decreased. Now, that's not to say that we're at zero, but we are at a point where, again, payroll is stabilized, and we believe the type of issues that we're having now are the type of issues that we would normally have and that we had before Workday. An example would just be an employee not reporting the amount of overtime worked, or the supervisor not approving it in a timely manner. What we were doing in the winter months is we were issuing off-cycle checks on a weekly basis to make employees whole. we are no longer issuing a large volume of off-cycle checks anymore because everything has been stabilized. So we feel very good of where we are with the Workday implementation now. Employees have been trained more on how to report their time using the online system, because before with ADP, it was all manual, fill out a timesheet, sign in on a log sheet. So that conversion to automation of time, automated approval of time, it took a period of time for city employees and supervisors to become accustomed to. With the additional training that's been provided, that has largely dissipated now.
Okay, thank you for that update. And the second question, we have, it's been over a year now in COVID, and is the process still the same as far when people have to go pay for their taxes and so on, the in-person? Has any of that changed since we're kind of moving out of COVID somewhat, some of the restrictions? Is that process still the same?
Okay, so allow me to answer your question this way. When COVID started, city buildings were closed to the public and the citizens. So a citizen that previously came in person to pay a bill, they now have to drop their payment off to a lockbox because citizens are not allowed to enter city buildings. That remains in effect. So presently, we're still using the lockboxes. We are not prepared to have the public returning to city buildings yet. So the processes that we've been using for the last 8 or 10 months remain in effect, which is use the lockbox. There's no face-to-face interaction with city staff for the finance department as it relates to bills. You pay online, mail it in, or use the drop box, but it's no face-to-face because we're trying to keep the staff safe from contracting COVID.
Okay, so does that mean you're exempting late fees still, or is that
Yes,
still
in the cases
okay.
where it's warranted, absolutely.
Okay. Those are my two questions. Just wanted to, reiterate how important customer service is, and how our citizens are, they're going through their own type of traumas at home, and it's important that we continue to do that, the best customer service we can. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. Director Raymond, first want to say again, thank you for working with us on the tax sale issue this year and your continued commitment to working on the issue moving forward to reform the system. I have one question related to that, and then another related to revenue collection, and then a bunch more, but I'll just do those two for now. There is a surplus bid fund that I don't see in the budget. And that is the difference between what a tax sale purchaser actually bid versus what they actually collect from whomever they're collecting the lien from. Where is that fund? How much is in it? And I understand that the homeowner has claims to some of that money, who just got foreclosed on, could possibly have claims to that money. So can you help us with that, where that is and how they can collect that funding? But also, if one of the recipients is supposed to be an LLC or something, they got foreclosed on because it was a vacant property, but there's surplus money there. If it's a defunct LLC, could we possibly think of ways to be able to distribute that funding to people who, to do some tax sale relief?
Okay. So the first part of your question is with the excess funds.
Right,
It's a
surplus bid
it's a-
fund. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a balance sheet account, so we don't budget it. So in other words, there's a specific account for that. Now, that money, as you indicated, is primarily for the purpose of the homeowner. So we are not allowed to use those funds for any other purpose than to reimburse homeowners that are due that money in the event of a foreclosure. So whether the homeowner is not able to be located, whether a property was owned by a LLC that's defunct, it belongs to whoever owned the property. So we would not be able to reallocate that money for any other purpose.
as a follow-up to that, Mr. Chair, Director Raymond, is it known that that these homeowners who just lost their home can be able to claim some of this money?
Yes.
How do they know?
It's part of the foreclosure process. Now, we don't advertise it, but because that's not the role of the finance department.
Right, okay, I appreciate it. Under revenue collections also, I guess this is a request. There are about 107 million in tax credits. And I'm wondering if we might be able to get I know there's a chart in the executive summary that outlines what those credits are, which is great. I'm wondering, just as we have with the high performance tax credit, we could get a map of, where those tax credits are being allocated.
Okay, we'll work with with BSIT to develop that.
That's request number 4. That's Ramos, and that's a map of all tax credits.
Yes, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Councilman Conway?
Mm-mm. You're muted
Can you hear me?
now.
Councilman Conway, we can't hear you. I definitely see you talking. I know
Can you
you're
hear me now?
trying. Yes, sir. There we
There we
go.
go. Oh, I just gave you this wonderful, I gave you all kinds of kudos.
You got a chance to practice it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Raymond, I want to thank you for the work that you've been doing to clean up some of the issues that we've had with Workday. We've had this conversation a number of times. The first question I have sort of ties to that. So in Service 148, the contractual services line item, that object is the second largest item in 148. I'm curious, what does that pay for? Does it pay for services like Workday and our contract with like Ernst & Young? And how are we measuring that we're getting our money's worth for that funding? Particularly, I'm asking that question because I'm really concerned and curious about how we are keeping our contractors accountable, especially when we put so much money into that bucket.
Mm-hmm. Councilman Conway, the reason you see that level of funding in revenue collections, those are primarily the vendors that support the backbone of the finance department's financial applications. It supports all of our outside collection activity like parking, fines management. It supports the collection of all the coinage we collect from meters. It also includes the IT services that support all of the billing systems that the finance department uses.
I'm sorry, Director Raymond, to
Oh.
interrupt you. I meant that question more broadly with regard to our contractual services. I just gave you a leak into my second question, but more broadly, contractual services is the second largest line item on finance's budget. So if you could talk a little bit about what those contracts are and how we're holding those contractors accountable, realizing that we put so much money in that bucket.
Okay. So again, well, in addition, specifically, it includes our contractual relationship for the city's accounting system, the city's procurement system. We work with these vendors on a daily basis to ensure that we are receiving the services that we should in a timely manner. It also includes the city's payroll system. So that's why you're seeing a large dollar amount. It's because these are very technical and very complex services that the finance department is receiving. We don't have the homegrown internal accounting system anymore. Presently, it's City Dynamics. We don't have an internal procurement system. It's city buy. So this is to cover the cost of all of the external support that's required. We also have Munis for our personal property billing system, as well as other taxes that we bill and collect. So essentially, it's for all of the external support to support our business operations.
Thank you. I want to be a bit more pointed to sort of follow.
Sure.
It's more specifically how are we holding those folks accountable? What are we tracking those metrics? What metrics are we tracking? And how do we make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck, given that these dollars are doled out to contractors and not necessarily to agencies that we have a direct control over?
Okay, so the first way we control the cost is we have competitively bid out all of these services, whether it's the city's accounting system, procurement system, billing systems, etc. We've billed them out on we have competitively bid them out to ensure that we're getting the most advantageous price to the city. Once those contracts are in place, we manage those contracts on a daily basis. We're in touch with these vendors daily. If the system goes down, we're immediately on the phone to get those systems back up in a timely manner. The service has been satisfactory, or we would be making plans to transition to another vendor. Now, with that said, we have to realize that would be complex. If we said today, oh, we don't like a particular system and we're going to fire them tomorrow. We're not going to fire them tomorrow because we can't do without that service overnight. Because again, all of the services we're talking about are long-term, whether it be a procurement system, an accounting system, or a payroll system. So that's how we manage it, and that's how we resolve issues, is from the daily management of the contracts.
Thank you. I don't want to belabor this point too much, and so I'll leave it here. Really, the sort of trick of it all is what are the metrics with which we're holding them to? Day-to-day metrics, monthly metrics that we know are red flags, when there are problems, so that we don't have to make too quickly a decision to fire a contractor, because of course we know that that's very difficult to do. When we choose someone, we tend to stick with them. So as we think about those, that bigger question, holding our contractors accountable, if we could think about what that line is, what that metric is, and how we're holding them accountable to delivering service, that'd be really helpful. I'll move on to my next question. The next question is about service line 148, revenue collection. Around the performance measure, the percentage of service requests closed on time, it was 45.2% in fiscal year 2020. If you could tell me a little bit about why that happened, or where that is, and what we may need to do to bring that back up, if we expect that to remain low, or if you can tell me what's going on there.
Yeah, the reason for the 45.2% for 2020 is directly related to COVID. From last March of 20 through June of 20, which was a third of the year, staff was working remotely, or staff were on permission leave. That is the primary reason for the decrease. What the city and all departments have done, once we started to get stabilized with COVID, we started implementing technology where employees could work more from home. So I expect that this number should start to come back up as we have more individuals working remotely. Because see, they weren't able to work remotely to begin with because they didn't have laptops, didn't have connectivity. We procured the laptops, we provided remote access to systems, and now there's been improvement with those numbers. But that's why it was directly related to COVID.
Right. And I know she said here in the budget book that it was due to a backlog that built up initially as a result of the ransomware attack. It sounds like we had kind of a double whammy, of course, a global pandemic and a ransomware attack right before it.
Yes.
If there's any support that we should be thinking about along the way, definitely would love to hear about it. Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other questions? Councilwoman McCray.
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Porter. I'm just going to use last names moving forward. I hope that no one takes any disrespect to that, but
No worries. No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Trouble saying councilman and councilwoman 700 times this week.
No worries. Thank you. No questions.
I believe that's everyone on the committee. We'll cycle back and yep, I got you. We're gonna Stokes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to Mr. Raymond. I know I've been getting calls. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Director Raymond's stepping out for 1 second, Councilman Stokes. We're gonna
I can wait till you come back if that's good.
Yeah, we'll go into recess for 1 minute. Well, we're not even gonna go into recess. We're just gonna pause for about a minute. Thank you. All right, Councilman Stokes, take it away.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Raymond, I just heard some of the questions were answered, but my question is, since I've been on the council, I've been hearing about a lot of the black-owned small business here in Baltimore, or black and brown business here in Baltimore, are always getting paid late. Some of them either they lose their employees or they end up going out of business. And I know back in 2017, I brought this up. Is there, when you look at how you paying your local business here in Baltimore, have you looked at how you can clear it up a little bit? The first of it, did you find out why was the issue of not them getting paid in 30 days? And if you did, what have you done different to make sure this don't keep occurring here in Baltimore City? Because I still hear it all the time. I'm sure my colleagues hear it all the time too about being paid late. Is there something you put in place that's going to be a little different? And we expect the business to be paid within that 30-day period.
Good morning, Councilman Stokes. To answer your question, yes, there are several things that we're doing. One, as I indicated previously, we have a citywide initiative to reduce late invoice payments. That is working well. We have reduced the number of outstanding invoices. Now, what is the cause of this? It's a lot of things, beginning with vendors that are not providing the type of information we need to immediately pay an invoice. So we're doing training with vendors, and we're preparing to do even more training with vendors before the end of June. We have a formal initiative where we are developing documents to share with the vendors on this is what's required to submit a proper invoice with the appropriate documentation that will allow us to expedite the payment. We have worked with agencies as well, and internally to the finance department, as was indicated earlier, we have hired additional staff to assist with the payment process once the invoices are approved by the agencies and all of the documentation is in place. So this administration takes this initiative very seriously, and we will continue to address this so that we can get our invoice payment at 30 days or less.
And real quick, with your additional staff, that means you're looking for not just your office to really get those payments out, but those vendors to really get that technical assistance so they don't keep repeating the same thing over and over and over. Or not particularly, your agency will be able to get that 30 days out in a timely manner. And Mr. Chair, is there, Mr. Raymond, is there something that you can submit to the council about what you're doing now in terms of getting it out, not just on the vendor side, we need that, but on the agency side to make sure we make sure that happens, make sure that 30 days get paid, make sure the vendors are doing their paperwork correct. Do you have any information, Mr. Chair? Can we ask for him to submit to the committee or to the council so we can look at that just to see how it's working now?
Director Raymond, can you summarize the councilman's request in one sentence, please?
Yeah, the finance department will prepare or provide to the committee a document which outlines the prompt payment initiative that's underway that I've described today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other colleagues that have not asked a question yet? All right, let's go back to Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At this time, I don't have any additional questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Director, I wanted to briefly touch on two things. The first is real estate transactions. We had a pretty significant backlog during COVID. I know your team has done a lot of work to reduce that backlog. Can you give us a summary of where we started and where we're at and where we expect to be?
Yes. When COVID-19 started, a backlog did develop within the Bureau of Revenue Collection as it related to real estate transactions. Because we had a number of staff working remotely or out of the office and not working, a backlog did develop. That backlog became at least a 12-week backlog. What we have done to address that, and by addressing it, over the last 3 months, we have been able to reduce the backlog to 6 weeks. And what we did to address the backlog was making arrangements for individuals to be able to work from home, review these documents from home, and we assigned additional staff to assist in the process. And we have been able to document that we were able to reduce the backlog from 12 weeks to a present level of 6 weeks. And we are continuing to try to reduce that backlog. And that is where we are now. Essentially, we've reduced that backlog by half from 12 weeks to 6 weeks. And we've noticed that the concerns and complaints have begun to diminish.
And do we know, just the last part of that question, do we know what the end goal is? Are we content with 6 weeks, or are we trying to get that a little lower?
We want to get it lower to approximately 2 weeks.
Outstanding. Thank you. And then my second question, and I'm going to be asking all the agencies this week. Can you give me a list of services that are currently impacted by COVID? And let me preface with, in the example of the real estate transactions, right? Even though there's a backlog, I'm not looking for that to be included in the answer. I'm looking for things like a specific office is closed to the public, or we're not able to do X, Y, and Z because of COVID, and we expect to resume it to start to address the backlog at a later date, if that makes sense.
It does. We'll provide the formal response, but what I can share with you is that because we are the finance department, there are no operations that are closed. It's the nature of the duties of the finance department. We cannot close or shut down the payroll unit. We cannot shut down the accounting department. We cannot shut down the budget department. We cannot shut down the procurement department. So for the finance department, we are continuing to provide all services. All services may not be functioning at 100% because of working remotely, but we have no portion of our operations that are closed down.
Okay, maybe I should be asking the question a different way.
Mm-hmm.
What services are modified as a result of COVID? Mm-hmm. Or what services are still, so for example, we're still doing the Dropbox, right? And I guess that really depends on when the health department says we can reopen.
Correct.
City buildings.
Yeah, so we'll let you know what's been modified, because cash, which you're referring to, has definitely been modified. No walk-in interaction at all. It's either mail the payment in, pay online, or use the Dropbox, but no entry to the building. So that would be a modified issue for our cash processing.
We'll go back to Nina on Councilman Stokes' request number 5. You got that? Director Raymond, can you read that one again? before I forget.
Yeah, Councilman Stokes requested a document from the Finance Department which explains the prompt payment initiative for both agencies and vendors.
All right, perfect. So that was number 5, Nina. Okay, Director, thank you. And then you're going to get me request number 6 will be a list of services that have been modified. As a result of COVID. Okay, excellent. We are going to go Burnett, Ramos, and Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is around Service 710, fiscal integrity and recovery. I've had a few conversations with residents and also just in my own sort of investigations around particular properties. We've come across properties that are obviously receiving like tax credits they're not supposed to. Usually it's like the homestead, but it's, you know, it's a rental or long-term unoccupied property. Can you just talk a little bit about the investigatory process and what that looks like to ensure that that there's no fraud or abuse taking place as it relates to these sort of credits?
Yeah, the staff of the Fiscal Integrity Unit report all suspected cases of inappropriate tax credits. Can you hear me? Report all suspected cases of fraud related to state tax credits to the State Department of Assessment and Taxation to make the determination of is this property owner occupied or not. SDAT has the ability to look at other databases, driver's licenses, the addresses from an income tax return to make the determination of should that property be receiving a homeowner's tax credit, because the thought is that it's a tenant living in it or it's vacant or whatever. So any of those instances that are reported to us, we work and coordinate with the state to do the appropriate research to determine if that credit should be retained or if it should be removed. And then further on other credits, the staff does its own research to determine if a credit is valid or if it's not valid. We have other databases that we can bump up against, for example, to determine if it's owner occupied, the records from the city's Department of Housing and Community Development to determine or not, because many times by bouncing the files back and forth, we're able to determine that it's not owner occupied and not eligible for a particular credit. And this unit has recovered since its inception in 2011, millions of dollars of credits that were unwarranted. So this unit has more than paid for itself.
Got it. Okay. The second question I had, Mr. Chair, was for there was a previous conversation with Councilmember Ramos around actual collection and then sort of, I guess, uncollected, an account of uncollected revenue. Or I'm not sure if I'm describing it the correct way. But I guess the follow-up I had to that was what happens to those unclaimed funds over time? Do they just sit in perpetuity, or where does it go from there?
Okay. So what Councilwoman Ramos was referring to are the excess funds that a homeowner that homeowners are entitled to in the event that they are the subject of foreclosure and lose their homes in foreclosure. So what I indicated in my response to Councilwoman Ramos is that we do not appropriate those funds. They're held in a balance sheet account for payment to the homeowner in the event of a foreclosure. And it's for that purpose only, to pay out to the homeowner in the event of a foreclosure. Now, the homeowner would be aware that these funds are available because it's part of the foreclosure process. This is a court action, and through that court action, they are advised about the fact that they may have funds available. And then we would pay out those funds to them. They contact the finance department, and then we pay them. The reason they have to contact us is we may not know where they are because they may no longer be in the address that's on record with the city, because most likely that is the address that they have lost, meaning that they're no longer in that property. So they reach out to the city, we confirm everything, and we make the payment to that individual or individuals, which is why we can't use those funds for some other purpose just because they don't appear to us immediately. So whether they make their request a year later, 2 years later, or whatever the time frame is, we make the payment. So yes, we hold the funds in perpetuity because it's due to them. Or it could be due to their heirs, depending if they've just, if they're deceased.
Okay. Quick follow up, and wouldn't expect you to have it here, so maybe it's a request to the committee. Would you be able to provide us an accounting of how much is in that fund currently?
Yes.
All right, that's going to be number 7.
7.
All right, who do we have next? Was it Ramos, then Conway? Ramos, Conway, Middleton, Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to my colleague for that follow-up on the surplus bid fund. I have a question about under procurement. I know that the city administrator wanted to do and has put out an RFI around a complete evaluation of the procurement system. I didn't see that allocation was under this line item or even anywhere in the budget. I didn't see it. Do you know where that is and what the status is of that RFI?
Okay, so to be clear, it's not a request for information. It's a formal request for proposal.
Sure. Okay.
It was issued about 6 weeks ago. The bids are due June the 2nd of this week, tomorrow. And
the allocation for that, the amount.
Henry, I can jump on that, Councilwoman Ramos. So the any consultant studies like that show up in an activity called special studies in miscellaneous general expenses. So you'll see, we budget money there because these things come up in the normal course of business. A study like this, some of our 10-year plan work that we've done with Ernst & Young is budgeted there, but we generally keep a pot of money there if there is, support we need outside. We don't budget that in finance in particular.
Okay, thank you. And as a follow-up to that, do you think that the questions that my other colleagues are asking around procurement and payment and all of that will be looked into from this study, correct?
Yes, this will be a transformational review of the procurement system process. It will include input from all of the stakeholders, agencies, vendors, etc. Looking at the city's procurement process from top to bottom, charter requirements, administrative processes, the software we use now, with an eye of this is what we look like now. What do we want the process to look like? What's needed to support the new process? My expectation is that it will be a one-year study to formulate the recommendations. And then based on the complexity of those recommendations, perhaps another 6 to 12 months for implementation. Now, I say this not having seen the proposals yet because they're not due till tomorrow. So part of the reason I had hesitated when you asked the question about the money is we're not going to actually know the costs of the various proposals until we get to that part of the phase because we don't have the proposals in hand yet.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. And then my second question is going to a different service, 707 risk management. It looked to me like this. First of all, I haven't seen risk management in any of the other agency budgets, so I'm assuming it all lies here. And it seemed like it was very focused, given the outcomes and stuff, about making sure that the employees are doing their job and not taking risk on themselves. Yet we've had a few instances where there was faulty equipment, or something happened where an employee may not be safe. So is this the risk management service here, and the people that are working here are focused on also just the general safety of our employees, making sure the trucks are doing the right thing, making sure, because we had the incident a few years ago where unfortunately someone died in one of our facilities. And so but I just don't see that kind of inputs and metrics in this particular service when we're talking about safety of our employees.
So let me respond this way. The risk management unit is responsible for safety issues citywide with the support of the agencies. These are the metrics that we use, but there are other metrics. But it is a citywide program for the safety of all city employees.
Okay, so I would say for next budget, we may want to look at those indicators to make sure that they're and the outcome measures. And then related to that,
So I'll take that under advisement.
Thank you. And a follow-up to that.
So Councilwoman, we're going to come back to you on that. Who do we have next, Conway?
Oh, sure. That was a third question. Okay, thanks.
Yes. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Councilman, before you go, just as a reminder, we've got 21 minutes left before we're going to end this session and move to the next one. So if everyone could please be brief with the background and focus on the questions. And Director Raymond, I would ask you to be as brief and complete as possible in your responses. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll be direct. Director Raymond, there's $3.3 million, in service 148, there's $3.3 million coming from the parking management, creating 21 new positions. Can you give me a little more insight as to what this is doing, what it's accomplishing?
Okay. So to be clear, we're not creating 21 new positions. We're transferring 21 positions from the general fund to the parking management fund. Previously, those 21 positions that were in the general fund were supported by a transfer credit from the parking management fund. We're eliminating the transfer credit and appropriating directly to the parking management fund.
Okay, thank you. And then I have another pretty direct question. In Service 704, there is $836,000 coming from utility funds, capital funds, and risk management. What is the intention here? What's the hope here? Service 704.
Yep. Yeah, the intention is that we decreased a transfer credit by that $836,000 to more appropriately reflect the value of the services that we can seek recovery from. So that was the intent, essentially cleaning up our processes related to transfer credits, and we reduced it, not increased it.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. That's my two questions, Mr. Chair.
Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question for clarity. Service 701, the printing services, I see we do for the Baltimore City Public School System. Could you give some clarity to that? Are we providing the service and they're paying us?
Yes, ma'am. If they request printing services, they pay for it just like all city agencies.
Okay, and what kind of documents or things? Because I would assume a school system such as that would have their own printing system.
Let me jump in. Oddly enough, I don't think that they do. In fact, they couldn't print their budget books.
Oh, okay.
I mean, unless I'm mistaken.
Yep. So we provide all print media to the school system upon request, whether it's just regular printing, graphic design, etc. But whatever they request, they pay for it, just as a city agency would.
Thank you. Yes. So you're going to flag that, you said, for the city schools? Just, okay. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Henry, you were talking about risk management a few minutes ago, and looking in the budget book, it reiterates what you said, that this service seeks to prevent employee injuries by, it sounds like it's very focused on preventing specifically employee injuries. Is there a broader scope to the Office of Risk Management than that? Does it work to mitigate other risks as well?
I would say
things like general liability for the city.
Yes. Yeah, it includes all forms of risk to the city, but focusing on workers, but that includes things like ensuring that every employee that drives a city vehicle has been properly trained, ensuring that if a city employee gets arrested for drunk driving in their personal vehicle, that we take away their city driving privileges. It's working with all of the city agencies to ensure that we're in compliance with the Maryland MOSHA as well as the federal OSHA standards.
I say, so I'm asking this because Daniel Ramos is very familiar with this concern of mine relating, and he's I understand he's continuing to do work to try to address this policy concern. But we have a DOT that allows and will themselves install planters in streetscape designs, but we have an Office of Risk Management that says that it's too great a risk to allow that to occur if it's done through a collaborative process with community members, where it's not DOT doing it, but DOT saying it's okay to do it. Risk management says that this is apparently too great a risk to allow to happen, and I just don't understand how that even falls within the scope of what the Office of Risk Management seems to be for.
Hey, Director Raymond,
Nothing to do with worker safety.
Director Raymond, I can take this. So the office is all types of risk. This is the office that, for example, went and procured cybersecurity. It does all other types of insurance policies, including facilities and fleet, et cetera. So they also have a role in looking at contracts and ensuring that we have the proper liability, that we are requesting the proper liability insurance for different city contracts. So it is a citywide approach on risk management. And for that particular request, we are working with the solicitor and risk management on this to just develop a process in order for the streetscaping to be done in partnership with nonprofit groups.
Okay, great. Thank you. I don't want to take up more time here because I know we're constrained on it. Thank you. But I do want to say thank you for all the work that has been done over the last couple of years. My big question for finance last year was on parking facilities licensing fees. You've done a fantastic job of inspecting all of them and collecting, back revenue and going after revenue that were due. You also did some really great work over the last year on religious tax exemption and working with SSTAT to look into properties that were benefiting from a religious tax exemption that they were not due for various reasons. I still have concerns about the interpretation of that law. For example, there's one property in the city that has a contract for $84,000 or $82,000 a year to lease out their parking lot to another entity, but they are still not being made to pay the $32,000 in property tax revenue on that property. And I think that this has to do with a poor interpretation of the state law. And I think, there are at least tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not far more than that, on the line if we actually take what I think is a reasonable view of the state law. I'd like to speak with you about that and increase those revenues. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Director, can you please follow up with Councilman Dorsey on that 85 some odd $1,000 one this week? All right, Councilman Dorsey, if you can make time for the director this week. Were there anyone else before we go back to Councilwoman? Before we go back to Ramos, anyone else?
I have a question, Mr.
Stokes.
Chair. This is for Mr. Raymond. It's about regarding funds that may be available to homeowners in event of foreclosure. Does the city hold those funds in an interest-bearing account? Can you hear me, Mr.?
Yes, I can hear you. The answer is no.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Ramos?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. Going back to the fiscal integrity and recovery, is there a public-facing way to be able to report possible, infractions? Do people dial 311? Is there a form on the website? This is if, somebody thinks that somebody, shouldn't be, collecting or taking a tax credit.
The way it works right now is the request might go into the Inspector General's fraud hotline, and then it's referred to the Finance Department. What I would say to the council members is if they become aware of a complaint, forward it to the Finance Department and we'll handle it.
Okay, so the public, if they think that there's an issue, would have to come through us in order to report something like that.
Through the Inspector General's fraud
Or through the
hotline.
Inspector General, okay. And then going back to the risk management piece, on the drug tests, are we still testing for marijuana of our employees?
Let's,
'Cause I
Councilwoman, let's hold that one for DHR, please.
okay, sure, that's fine.
Yep.
That's it.
Thank you. Colleagues, Mr. President, colleagues, any other questions for finance? Director, thank you very much. First, Bob, I want to sincerely thank you and your team. You've been an incredible partner to the council over the past few years. I really appreciate it, especially working with you. Pedro, I'm starting to get to work with Aaron, and especially Mara James, who does a lot of the outreach for your team, and Mira. So thank you. You guys are doing fantastic work. Director Raymond, you already heard the thanks to Bob and his team. Also want to take a moment to thank Joanna Collado and Dave Riker, who are doing really good work around tax credits. Really appreciate all the due diligence that they do. Joanna, of course, and everyone else on your team. And Henry, you're one of my favorite public servants of the city. I appreciate everything you do and your responsiveness. So thank you very much. We're now in recess until 11 a.m.